First things first, before we even talk about shaping a map, you need to know how to design around the new abilities. We've got sprint, thrust, slide, charge, ground pound, hover, and clamber. Individually, they don't mean much, however in context to one another, they change everything. Scaling is the trickiest part in this game as it's not a fixed ratio. Direct remakes of older maps don't seem to work in Halo 5, as I'm sure you've noticed, because for the first time in Halo history, the utility weapon, the Magnum, has the shortest range of any precision gun in the sandbox, and is one of the slowest killing guns in the sandbox. On the other hand, when you begin chaining all the abilities together and thrust slide charging around the map, you've got the fastest movement speed and greatest movement delta of any Halo game, and given the separation of movement and combat in Halo 5, this can be tricky. Looking at remakes of past Halo maps, for example, if you scale around the traditional walk speed of a Spartan, a player can just thrust slide across the map. If you design around the maximum movement delta in Halo 5, the map ends up massively overscaled, as the pistol's red reticle range is only about 120 feet unzoomed. If you scale around the red reticle range of your utility weapon, you end up with maps that can be crossed in the blink of an eye. So do you scale for movement or you scale for combat? What does this even mean anymore? It means you have to scrap everything you know about traditional design and really crack down on what makes Halo 5 tick. We know that controlled pathing is vital in any level design experience, as we covered last episode, and that statement rings true especially in Halo 5. But given all the movement abilities, it can feel impossible to truly control player movement. So what do you do when you can't simply extend the length of any given pathway to counter excessive movement, because then it pushes it outside of reasonable combat range? And to design around the short red reticle range of our utility weapon means tightening the map, which means uncontrolled chaos and excessive assault rifle dominance, which we want to avoid given how powerful all the automatics are in Halo 5. Well, there are some tricks, most of which involve 1. Convoluting your map pathing, 2. Keeping the pathing controlled, and 3. Opening your sightlines. Convoluting your map's pathing essentially means that point A to point B isn't a beeline. You're not just running in a straight line from area to area, because it's nearly impossible to scale anything in this game using that methodology, but rather having your paths twist and turn, check back in and out, and serpentine as they progress throughout the map. This makes it so that players, while even moving at maximum speed deltas, are moving throughout the map at a controlled pace. And it brings fights within Red Reticle. This can apply to the small scale design or the large scale design. Small scale design refers to the area to area, moment to moment combat a player experiences in a map. It means the small crate in the corner of the room, the tiny lip that lets a player make a sneaky jump, or the crack in the wall that lets him catch a glimpse at another player. Large scale design refers to the holistic shape of your map and the way players move throughout it in a controlled and general manner. Keep in mind there's no true hard distinction between these two, and that the lines often blur into each other, as sometimes a small edge is all it takes to shift the flow of the entire map. Your small scale design and simple decisions can often change how your map plays at a grander level, so keep that in mind. Small scale area to area combat often defines how fun the moment to moment combat is in any given map, but it doesn't carry any longevity or depth with it. Think of Rust from Modern Warfare 2. There's an infinite amount of tiny, stupid sightlines and ridiculous holes to shoot through, so there's plenty to learn. But at the end of the day, the map is still just a small square with random cover that offers no meaningful strategies, counterplays, or even decisions to be made. Large scale design is what defines the parameters and gives depth to the map, replayability, choices. It's the general shape. Think of a simple blockout with no details or art. The map itself might work phenomenally, but there's just not much to learn and explore. And again, there's no hard line that defines these two methodologies and separates them from each other. It's just something to keep in mind. Try to provide proper shape to the map while also giving players the little things that they can use to turn fights in their favor. At the end of the day, if I had to define what good level design meant in one sentence, I would say good level design gives players the opportunity to succeed. So do exactly that. The final two notes to keep in mind when scaling for games like Halo 5 work in conjunction with another is keeping your pathing controlled and your sightlines open. These might seem kind of contradictory at first because those two usually imply the opposite of one another. Free-flowing maps typically play like a massive jungle gym in Halo 5 with all the clamber and long jumping. Room-based maps have been great for segregating combat traditionally and controlling pathing. However, most instances of room-based maps in Halo 5 fall prey to a lot of tight corners and short ranges, which can mean an excess of assault rifle spraying. We want to avoid that. We want to empower a good pistol user, not because the AR shouldn't exist, but rather because the pistol is a more skillful weapon, and the level design should represent and reward that fact. Opening the map up while controlling and convoluting the pathing on the large and small scale means that escaping from combat isn't as simple as just pressing the thrust button to hide behind a doorway and resetting the fight. Players need to be preemptively thinking and predicting about positioning ahead of time, while also allowing them to use their combat abilities amidst combat, because your thrust isn't being burned to cross this huge divide. The issue is that most Halo 5 maps don't take any sort of preventative measure against this, and nearly every transition route is a completely straight line. So you end up with these large open expanses that are difficult to cross without using a thrust slide, and then you use thrust slide to cross them, which puts you at a disadvantage when you get into a fight immediately after, which means you're punished for simply trying to move and be aggressive. Or you end up dividing these long sight lines with constant cuts and 90-degree turns, which also isn't ideal because 90-degree angles tend to breed either very long or very close range encounters, both of which are Halo 5's weaker elements, as the pistol has a gimped zoom against every rifle and is outranged. Or you end up turning the corner to someone with an assault rifle in your face, Spartan charging you. Softer gradual turns go a long way towards keeping the fights in mid-range, which is Halo 5's strength, which is something that, again, we don't really see much of in Halo 5's map pool. Keep in mind that sightlines outside of the red reticle range isn't the end of the world so long as most of these sightlines don't serve combat purpose. It's totally fine to have these ledges or windows well beyond red reticle if their purpose is to provide information and prediction of the battlefield and how to approach it, rather than directly engaging in it. A final note that I didn't mention earlier is that it helps to build your map's area-to-area progression more vertically, as opposed to side-by-side elongated horizontal. Players can cross horizontal distances fairly quickly in Halo 5. They can't, however, just run up a wall. So that covers spacing and scaling in relation to movement speed and combat ranges, but where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with distances that allow players to use their abilities amidst combat and not for basic traversal. It means your thrust can be an evasive tool and not something that is burned to reach normal position and then leaves the player stranded while they wait for it to recharge. I mean, too often I've seen Forge maps that force players to make subsequent jumps that are well outside standard ranges, and they force a player to essentially just stand in place and wait for their thrust to come back up just to make the next jump. I mean, that's not dynamic flowing arena gameplay, that's just waiting. We're here to run and gun, not run or gun. And making a player run and gun is difficult in Halo 5, as closing the gap means dropping your weapon. But that's the mistake most designers make. In a shooter, you don't need to close the gap. In fact, killing someone oftentimes is better done moving away from the enemy player and not towards. This extends to balancing verticality and creating checks and balances to keep your game moving. Take this scenario for example. The advantageous player here is at the top of Prisoner, looking down at the enemy. Does this ramp that leads to the top of the map actually help the player at the bottom? No, because having a ramp that leads to a power position does nothing to actually check the position. You're just adding a way to get there. I mean, you could place 100 ramps here and the top spot would still be powerful because you're not addressing the core issue of what gives it strength. You're just placing more options to get to the place of power. Nothing actually changes. What needs to be done is this ramp should extend beyond the high position, essentially giving the lower player the advantage over the higher player, just on the merit that he will be in the better spot by being in the worst spot. I call this a 1-3-5 solution. You essentially take poorer areas of a level design and give them utility by having them path above into much higher areas, skipping levels entirely. It forces players in advantageous spots to constantly move at the risk of being superseded by lower players that path above them. And what's interesting is that this leads to an effect where two teams constantly one-up each other and preemptively jump to the next spot and the next spot and force encounters to constantly move and evolve throughout your map in a beautiful way. Keep in mind that the way players reach counter positions is just as important as the counter position itself. This isn't Quake where a hop, skip, and jump can get you across the map in a blink of an eye. Things move a bit slower in Halo. So to ensure that your 1-3-5 or counter positions actually work, you need to ensure that your players can not only reach them safely, but reach them in time. In this example, the lower player has a staircase that elevates him from the first level to the third level. However, what does this mean in the heat of battle? Absolutely nothing, because the act of walking to a higher position doesn't actually lend you any advantage of the higher position. Simply turning the angle of this staircase alone blocks the line of sight and allows the lower player to reach the higher position during combat safely and in time to check the enemy. Make sure when you build your checks and balances that you think of the game you're building around and design it in a way that makes sense for the movement and the health mechanics. This movement pattern in which players move around and elongate gunfights touches on a much deeper subject of designing around different player counts. A common misconception is that designing for larger player counts means designing larger maps, and this couldn't be further from the truth, because changing the player count doesn't magically change the range of your pistol to compensate, and it doesn't mean players move quicker or slower. What it does change is player psychology and the playstyle, or rather, the way in which they choose to move around the map against enemy teammates and with your own teammates. Elongating gunfights and allowing them to evolve and migrate is a luxury that's usually found within lower player counts, 1v1 or 2v2. Less players means less eyes on you, which grants freedom of movement, and you have a more difficult time creating unbreakable setups between just you and your teammate. Both of these are good things. A rule of thumb I usually run by is that if a map has the ability to be camped, it will happen in 4v4. It's the highest competitive player count used in Halo, and if the past 16 years have shown us anything, it's that in competitive Halo, if a team has the ability to set up and camp, they will. I can already see the confusion, as in the past I've preached about creating hard counters and punishing players with deaths, which leads to faster gameplay, but now I'm saying the opposite, and to elongate gunfights. So, which is true? Well, both are. Given Halo's long kill times, high-level 4v4 matches can be really difficult. Poor level design means that killing a player without assistance from your teammate can be near impossible in some situations without the enemy simply running away. Elongating any gunfights in this sense would simply bring the game to a halt, as kills would be impossible to lock down. This extended dance between two players would almost always be interrupted by outside influences. You don't have time to truly play out every situation and feel out the enemy. That's just the nature of 4v4. So, as player counts and team shot goes up, lean towards hard counters and punishing bad plays. Teamwork has always been the bread and butter of 4v4 Halo, and ironically, the best way to strengthen teamwork and map cycling in 4v4 is to strengthen the individual. Building your level so that a single player can see success with quick kills is going to lead to full teams cycling and proactively moving around maps even in 4v4. It allows for huge plays and shifts in map direction to happen without literally forcing 3 players to shoot at the same enemy. Again, good level design means giving players the opportunity to succeed no matter what situation. So let the individual player succeed so that the entire team can succeed. And a team that is succeeding is a team that is moving. As player counts go down, freedom of movement goes up. 2v2 doesn't require the hard checks a 4v4 map does because a fleeing player doesn't have the support of 3 of his teammates. That means you're free to allow players to move in a completely different way because the beauty of doubles is in the ebb and flow between yourself and your teammate. Let fights evolve and move throughout the map. Make use of the entire footprint. Refine your small scale design so that every fight is a journey through the map as you and the enemy player make use of all the geometry available to you. This is the type of depth that will give your doubles map longevity and opportunity. The lower player count also means that tracking enemy players is a much more manageable task, so you're free to give players more counterplay opportunities in doubles than you would in 4s. 1v1 would obviously lie on the extreme end of the spectrum and follows the same exact principle. There's nothing less interesting than a 1v1 map where every single encounter starts and ends with a kill. Halo 5's gunplay isn't remarkably deep, so there's not much fun to be had in single player, shooting 5 times, getting the kill, and then repeating the process several seconds later. Seriously, almost every weapon in the game is pretty easy to use. There's not a huge skill gap when it comes to gunplay in Halo 5, which means that there's not much potential to outplay an enemy when it comes down to a simple gun duel, which means that there's not much gratification to be gained. Maps that lack mental depth simply aren't gratifying to play because they feel redundant and meaningless thanks to the weapon. You need to compensate for Halo's poor weapon sandbox and give players the opportunities to outsmart and outplay the enemy team through movement. Every encounter in a 1v1 should not end with a kill. This entire methodology stems from Halo's recharging shield mechanic, which can be both a blessing and a curse. In games without recharging health, balance is much easier, as you don't need to worry about advantageous positions where you can simply poke at the enemy player until they're forced to move to collect health pickups or whatever. In Halo, this usually means backing off for a few seconds, recharging, and then challenging again as if nothing has ever happened. This can actually be used to our advantage in a cool way, but you need to be aware when designing your map how to build around recharging health. Essentially, when a player is damaged and needs to recharge, they will back off from the fight. This is a great opportunity to design geometry that allows fights to evolve by having encounters with multiple points of contention, meaning recharge and re-challenge in a new spot. This clip on Legion shows a fight where 3 separate encounters take place. Once where I knock him off the catwalk, which allows me to push up, another where I knock him off the pyramid, which allows me to push again for the final encounter on the ground floor. The advantage of recharging health is exactly that. You can build multiple encounters into a single fight, and every single one of them will feel full and lengthy. It gives depth to your map, and most importantly, it allows the retreating player the chance to force the mistake on the enemy and succeed. Good level design gives players the opportunity to succeed. If you take this concept of multiple encounters fitting into a single fight, it allows designers to make full use of the map. One of the least satisfying things about playing games like Call of Duty is that fights start and end in exactly the same spot. I mean, it doesn't even feel like you're using the map so much as the map is just something that's there and has cover. It feels meaningless, honestly, and while Halo has come a long way from its roots in arena shooters, we still have the luxury of longer kill times and decent movement speeds that allow us to truly create encounters that range the full stretch of map geometry. And if done correctly, it should feel like players are actively using the map in every single moment and encounter, and not just standing on it. The simplest way to think about recharging health in context of level design is to put yourself in the eyes of the player. You just damaged the enemy and you step back for a brief moment to recharge. Can you move up and re-challenge in a more advantageous spot? Are you rewarded for it? What are your options? Did that encounter matter at all, or are you just stuck in the same spot waiting for the same exact fight to happen again? If that's the case, change something. Moving throughout the map can be a beautiful thing if it's done correctly. I mean, it shouldn't just be forward and backwards. It should be up, down, left, right, diagonal. I touched on sandbox design before in the Legion commentary, so I won't dive too deeply into it, but a truly well-designed map doesn't just give one option of play or a single direction to move throughout the map. If that's the case, then players aren't truly even playing each other. They're just saying who can play the map better. There's no decision making in that because the level designer has already made the decision for the player. You don't want that. You want to provide a play space for people able to move about and actively solve problems as to where they should go next based on the enemy position. I mean, when's the last time you've seen a game on Coliseum where players actively fought and moved from snipe side to rocket side? Probably never, because the only real options are to progress forward and backwards, which makes Coliseum a poor experience when it comes to Slayer. You push to their side, turn around, and do it again. I mean, built to give players meaningful options on all axes. 2 base 2 towers like midship are better examples of how to build fights that can actually happen in all directions given the context of the game. It makes the map a lot more dynamic and thought-provoking experience when you have options other than just running forward off the spawn. Again, this flexible sandbox design is crucial for building maps that will stand the test of time. Maps only start to age when they're played the same way over and over. Map density is another problem I see come up a lot. Many designers like to shift from radically open spaces to very, very tight spaces. This in and of itself isn't an issue, as there's a lot of balancing utility to be had, but it starts to play a problem when it comes to player psychology and player prediction. We know player prediction is important to create structure and control within a game, so losing sight of someone isn't an issue. The bigger problem is when someone disappears into a much denser space and has many options presented to them. You effectively have no way of knowing which option they're taking, which turns the match at that point into a guessing game. Random is not good. So look at this mathematically. If a player can cover X amount of units in any given time, but you have 2 radically different spaced areas of the map, one area free-flowing and open and the other small and enclosed, player A loses sight of player B within these tunnels. Player B within 5 seconds could be effectively in any number of spots based on their travel time. However, player B knows that player A will still be in the same section of the map given the difference in map density. This turns the match into a guessing game, but only for one player, and that's not okay. If the density of your map changes rapidly, that's fine. Just make sure to have a controlled and predictable amount of entrances and exits. Again, this doesn't really play into any sort of true geometric balancing, but player psychology is an extremely important aspect to any PvP video game, and it's worth looking into. Also realize that entrances don't always equal exits. A single entrance into a double exit means that pushing through an area is rewarding and easier to do because you have more options to leave through and it's harder to defend. It's easier to push out of the exits, plural, on the right than it is the single entrance on the left. This methodology can be really powerful in one-sided game modes to make the defending team push up and utilize more of the map instead of just sitting back. It means their job gets easier as they push up. It's incentive because they have less possible sightlines and entrances to cover. Final note on map density. When building for 2v2, it's probably best that your map can be covered from 2 people's perspectives, you and your teammate. If the enemy team still isn't visible, then you should at least be able to make a pretty educated guess as to where they could be standing. And if you're unable to predict with any sort of accuracy where the enemy team is coming from despite having 2 perspectives on the map, your map is probably overly segmented for a doubles map and you've got to rework some floor space and lower the segmentation. That's another factor that can tip a map towards the 4v4 player count, or often in the other direction. One final brief topic I wanted to cover is relative verticality. This essentially means that the height you are standing at is only relevant to exactly what you can see from there. See here in this example how despite being at the very top of a staircase, I'm looking upwards at a platform that has an advantage over me. As I move down the staircase, I see something that's eye level, and when I finally reach the bottom of the staircase, I'm looking down at a platform, which means that the bottom of this staircase is more powerful and more influential than the top. It's a useful thing to keep in mind when balancing your map, as you can make the very highest rooms sometimes feel like the lowest, and the lowest spots can feel like they have a lot of power. So, we covered how to properly scale in Halo for both movement and combat. We talked about small scale versus large scale design, building for different player counts, what that actually means and how players move about the map. We talked about elongating gunfights, building around shield recharge, sandbox design, changing map density, as well as several unique methodologies on how to go about balancing. Most of what I've talked about up until this point in the design series has been how to go about true balancing and level design, but I've only briefly skimmed over player psychology and what that means and what to look for, what to ignore. There's a lot to talk about here, so I'll have to cover it on the next episode of How to Design a Halo Map.
I got broads in Atlanta, just to lean the family. Credit cards in the scammers, hitting the licks in the van. Legacies, family, wait and see, look like a panda. Going out like a Montana, honey killers on the helmets. Legacies, family, wait and see.